Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Echo of Life. There comes a moment when you catch your reflection and feel a weight you never signed up to carry. A heaviness you didn't choose. A story that didn't begin with you, yet somehow became yours to finish. Maybe you've never said it aloud, but somewhere inside, who you've become or who you're afraid of becoming is tied to the man who raised you or the man who didn't. This isn't about blame. It's not about pointing fingers at a parent who likely wasn't shown how to do things differently. It's about something quieter. Something you feel when the world goes silent and every distraction fades, leaving only the question you've spent years avoiding. Why do I feel so uncertain? Why do things that seem simple for others feel so hard for me? Why do I keep fighting battles no one else can see? The answer, or at least the beginning of it, often traces back to your father. A father doesn't just raise a child. He shapes their inner voice, the one you hear when you doubt yourself, when you're trying to impress someone, when you fail, when you're afraid to take the next step. For some, that voice is supportive. For others, it's harsh. For many, it's absent. But for you, maybe it became a voice that makes you shrink instead of rise. A voice that makes you hesitate instead of act. A voice that quietly repeats old patterns you inherited without ever realizing it. You might ask yourself, why do I crumble under pressure? Why do I avoid what could actually help me grow? It's not because you're weak by nature. It's because you learn to breathe in an atmosphere shaped by someone else's fears. Think about how a child learns strength. Children watch how their parents move through the world. They learn whether emotions are safe to express or better kept hidden. Whether vulnerability is allowed or must be concealed. If your father raised you with silence, you learn to silence yourself. If he raised you with anger, you learn to walk on emotional eggshells. If he raised you with impossible standards, you learned that nothing you did was ever enough. If he was absent, you learned to question your own worth. If he was unpredictable, you learned to overthink everything. If he taught you that strength meant not feeling, you learned to confuse numbness with power. If he never apologized, you learned that admitting mistakes was dangerous. If he demanded perfection, you developed anxiety disguised as ambition. If he avoided discomfort, you learned avoidance as a way to cope. If he shrank from his own potential, you inherited a blueprint for shrinking from yours. None of this makes him a bad person. It makes him human. But it also means you grew up defending yourself from things you never should have had to face. And maybe that's why you feel unsure now. Not because you are weak, but because you grew up in survival mode. You were learning how to read his moods instead of understanding your own. You were learning how not to upset him instead of how to express yourself. Survival mode changes you. That's not just poetry. It's neuroscience. Studies show that environments shaped by unpredictability or emotional distance affect how stress pathways form, how confidence grows, how decisions are made. You might feel stuck today not because you're limited, but because your nervous system was trained from childhood to expect danger instead of possibility. Think about how much of you was shaped trying to solve someone else's emotional puzzle. How you learned to hide your true self because being seen felt unsafe. That's not weakness. That's adaptation. That's your mind protecting you the only way it knew how. But here's where life gets complicated. What protected you in the past becomes what limits you in adulthood. You learned emotional freezing as a child, and now you call it indecision. You learned self-doubt early, and now you call it humility. You learned to avoid conflict, and now you call it keeping the peace. You learned to depend on no one, and now you call it strength. You learned to expect little, and now you call it realism. You learned to stay small, and now you call it your personality. What if you aren't choosing these things? What if they were chosen for you? Because here's a truth you may have never spoken aloud. Your relationship with your father became the blueprint for how you relate to yourself. If he never supported your dreams, you learned to distrust your own. If he rarely expressed pride, you learned to perform for validation rather than fulfillment. If he didn't know how to handle emotion, you learned to suppress your own until they grew too heavy to carry. If he carried unresolved fears, you inherited the emotional echoes. What you call weakness may actually be inherited self-protection. But here's what's important. You don't have to continue the story you were given. People often underestimate how deeply a father's energy imprints itself. Not through lectures, but through presence. through tone, through what he did when life grew difficult, through the parts of himself he never healed. A father unconsciously teaches you what to fear. He teaches you what strength looks like. He teaches you how to view yourself. And if he struggled with his own inner battles, he might have passed them to you, not through intention, but through example. You may have grown up believing that emotional restraint is strength, that silence is maturity, that never needing help is independence, that self-sacrifice is love, that overworking is responsibility, that exhaustion is normal, that your worth must be proven, not felt. But look at how much of that has begun to collapse beneath you. Look at how tired you are. Look at how disconnected you feel from yourself. Look at how you fight invisible battles no one sees. Look at how you doubt every decision. Look at how you replay conversations for hours. Look at how uncomfortable praise makes you feel. Look at how guilty you feel when you rest. Look at how hard it is to say what you really feel. Look at how numb you've become to things that should bring joy. This isn't weakness. This is emotional conditioning. And healing begins with honesty. Honesty begins here. You didn't become this way alone. You learned your habits, your defenses, your reactions, your fears, your hesitations, your expectations, your emotional patterns, your definitions of strength and weakness. They were taught subtly, quietly, consistently by the environment you grew up in. And when people say, just be confident, they don't realize you were raised in an environment where confidence felt like danger, where being too loud, too bold, too honest, too expressive, too independent could create tension or judgment. But here's the part no one told you. You can outgrow the emotional blueprint you were given. Just because you inherited patterns doesn't mean you're doomed to repeat them. Just because you were shaped by someone else's limitations doesn't mean you can't rise beyond them. Just because your father couldn't show you a certain kind of strength doesn't mean you can't learn it yourself. This is where your story starts to change. Because at some point, life gives you two choices. Continue being shaped by the past, or reshape yourself in the present. The moment you become aware of these patterns, the moment something inside whispers, wait, maybe this isn't who I really am, that is the beginning of strength. The fact that you're questioning your emotional inheritance means you've already taken a first step your father may never have known how to take. That's not weakness. That's evolution. But before you can rebuild, you have to face something difficult. Something many avoid their entire lives. You have to see your father not just as a parent, but as a person. Person with fears, with doubts, shaped by his own upbringing. A person who may have never received the emotional tools he needed. A person who survived rather than thrived. A person who loved in the only way he knew how, even if that way left you feeling unseen. Understanding this doesn't excuse anything, but it explains everything. And when you understand the origin of your patterns, you stop feeling defective and start feeling aware. Awareness is the first form of freedom. It's how you begin rewriting your story. It's how you stop inheriting struggles that were never yours to keep. Once you begin that process, something shifts. A quiet strength starts to form, not the kind your father modeled, but a new kind. A strength rooted in self-understanding. A strength built on awareness. A strength that grows not from pretending to be invulnerable, but from understanding what made you vulnerable in the first place. Once you begin to see your father as a human being rather than an unshakable figure, something inside softens. Not in a way that weakens you, but in a way that makes you honest with yourself. Maybe he never learned how to express care. Maybe he didn't know how to apologize. Maybe he never received patience, so he didn't know how to offer it. Maybe he never saw vulnerability modeled, so he avoided his own emotions. Maybe he mistook seriousness for strength. Maybe he confused control with protection. Maybe he believed silence meant safety because that's what he was taught. These pieces of him became pieces of you. But here's the turning point. Once you understand the origin of your patterns, you gain the power to challenge them. You start noticing moments where you act out of habit, not truth. You catch yourself repeating emotional reflexes that no longer belong to you. You begin to recognize that your inner critic isn't your voice. It's an echo from someone who never learned how to speak kindly to themselves. That realization is the beginning of maturity. Because growing up isn't just about paying bills or becoming independent. It's the slow, sometimes tender process of separating your identity from your upbringing. It's learning to look at the emotional rules you inherited and asking, does this still serve me? It's discovering that strength doesn't come from repeating old patterns. It comes from breaking them. Maybe that's where you've been stuck. Not because you lack ability, but because you've never questioned the invisible rules your childhood wrote inside you. Rules like, keep everything inside, don't burden anyone, handle everything yourself, stay quiet, stay polite, stay stable, don't disappoint, don't express too much, don't ask for help, don't be too honest, don't show weakness. But look at what those rules cost you. They taught you how to endure, but not how to live. They taught you how to function, but not how to feel. They taught you how to adapt, but not how to become yourself. They taught you how to avoid breaking down, but not how to build up. You survived your childhood patterns, but surviving isn't the same as growing. Questioning the rules you inherited will feel like betrayal, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your mind associates those rules with safety. They protected you once. They kept the peace. They kept you from conflict, judgment, discomfort. But you're not that child anymore. The threats you prepared for don't exist. Yet part of you still lives as if they do. That's why you avoid difficult conversations. Why you struggle to express emotion. Why you feel nervous when someone asks what you really want. Why you hesitate before speaking your mind. Why you feel responsible for the feelings of everyone around you. Why you overthink small decisions. Why you close off when you most need connection. Why you shrink when the moment calls you to rise. Why you chase validation instead of truth. Why you exhaust yourself trying to be the version of you that keeps everyone comfortable. These aren't random habits. They're inherited self-protection mechanisms. But there comes a moment, quiet, often unexpected, when you realize the life you're living isn't the life you truly want. It's the life you learned to maintain. And maintaining something that never belonged to you is exhausting. So let me ask gently, when was the last time you asked yourself who you would be if you weren't trying to meet the standards of the father you grew up with? Not the ideal father, not the perfect father, the father he actually was. Who would you be if you weren't trying to avoid his disapproval? Who would you be if you weren't afraid of repeating his mistakes? Who would you be if you stopped living in the emotional shadow of his silence, his expectations, his distance? Maybe this is the moment you realize your uncertainty isn't lack of strength. It's lack of permission. Permission you've been waiting your whole life to receive, without realizing you can grant it to yourself. Because here's the truth no one told you. You can outgrow the environment that shaped you. You can evolve beyond the patterns you inherited. You can become someone your father never had the chance to become. You can heal wounds he never acknowledged. You can break cycles he didn't know how to escape. You can build an inner world he never experienced. None of that is betrayal. It's continuation. It's expansion. It's choosing growth where he chose survival. You're not rejecting him by becoming more. You're honoring the part of him that wanted more but didn't know how to reach it. Maybe, on some deep unspoken level, that's what he wanted for you all along. This transformation won't come from sudden breakthroughs or dramatic decisions. Real change is slower, quieter. It comes from small shifts repeated consistently. It happens the moment you pause before shrinking. The moment you express something small you would have once hidden. The moment you ask for help without guilt. The moment you stand your ground calmly. The moment you let yourself rest without shame. The moment you stop over-explaining. The moment you allow discomfort without running from it. The moment you choose honesty over avoidance. The moment you forgive yourself for things you learned, not things you chose. These moments accumulate. Slowly, steadily, quietly. And over time, they build a new internal voice. One that replaces the echo of your father's limitations with a voice that sounds more like you. Not the conditioned you. Not the obedient you. Not the protected you. The real you. The one who's been waiting beneath the surface. The you who wants to take risks without fearing judgment. The you who wants to speak without rehearsing. The you who wants to feel without apologizing. The you who wants to build something meaningful, not just acceptable. The you who wants to stop pretending everything is fine. The you who wants to break free from inherited expectations. The you who wants to live with purpose, not compliance. Maybe that version of you feels distant. Maybe it feels unreachable. Maybe you don't know where to begin. But every transformation begins with one simple realization. You are not responsible for the emotional gaps your father carried. You are only responsible for what you choose to carry forward. Your father's strength shaped you, but so did his weaknesses, his fears, his silence, his insecurities, his unhealed parts. But now you have something he didn't: awareness. Awareness is the first doorway to change. And once you walk through it, something remarkable happens. You realize you're not becoming weaker by confronting your past. You're becoming stronger by understanding it. Because real strength isn't the absence of emotion. Real strength is acknowledging your patterns without judging yourself for them. Real strength is seeing your father clearly, his best and his worst, without letting either define your future. Real strength is choosing growth even when it feels unfamiliar. That unfamiliar feeling, that's how you know you're becoming someone new. Maybe one day when you look back, you'll realize something powerful. The very thing you once called weakness was actually the starting point of your transformation. It was the signal that something inside you needed more guidance, more understanding, more safety. You are allowed to build your own definition of strength. One rooted in awareness, compassion, courage, honesty, and self-respect. And the most powerful part? You don't have to wait for permission. You can begin right here, right now, with nothing more than a quiet decision. Your story continues with you, not with the patterns you inherited, not with the weight you carried, not with the limits you were taught, but with the strength you are discovering within yourself. And as you move forward, you might begin to see something unexpected, something almost gentle. You were never weak because of your father. You only believed you were. What you called weakness was the first step toward becoming stronger than the generation before you. And that strength, your strength, is only beginning to unfold. Thank you for watching my video. For more update, please subscribe Moo channel.